Good morning, everybody. Hey. Let's see if we're live. I think we are. Yes, we are. Hey, cool. All right. Let me make an official announcement for everybody. And we're starting. How's my voice? I'm not sure if anybody's there yet. Everyone, let's go. Alright, turn my phone off. Oh, let's go. How's everybody doing today? Got my coffee ready. Hey, Augustine. Hey, Ian. People are here. Hi. Hey, Ilya, what's up, dude? Hey, Julie. Ellie. Vin. Hey. Are you ready for some environment talk about exteriors? It's gonna be fun. I changed things up a bit. I'm gonna talk a little bit more in depth about composition today. And the difference between environment, exterior and interior, because I just feel that you guys need to hear that. I did had a speed paint demo in mind, but with all the things that we already did last session, you kind of have a solid grasp of a painting process. So I feel that you guys need to hear more about theory today. And that's what we're gonna do. And it's gonna be glorious and it's gonna be epic. Hey, Marco's here. Cool. Yeah, share with your grandma, save it live. I made an Instagram post, so if someone wants to share an Instagram post announcing this lecture, feel free to do that. If not, that's okay. Just relax. Enjoy. Have fun. All that stuff. Oh, I have 2 minutes till we start. Yesterday I was playing Left 4 Dead with the Viking gang. So epic. Such a good game. Too bad they couldn't make Back 4 Blood better. Yeah. Left 4 Dead has a special place in my heart. Such a well-made game. Really good environment in there, by the way. To connect it to the topic of today, I guess. Exterior and interior. For the most part, very clear where to go, and level design is very nice. So, hats off to who did it? Turtle Games, and then they sold it to Valve. I don't remember, but yeah, super cool game. Yeah, we had Julie, one of our mods, playing with her husband. It was lots of yelling. Ah, zombies on my back, help me! Yeah, it's a really fun game. All right, 1 minute till it start. More puns. Yeah, Julie and Hunter were picking on me. They were gaining up on me. Yeah. Right, 30 seconds till we start. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding. Can't wait for the Saturday because Topster, is gonna be speaking, and he's gonna unveil the veil of mystery behind good environment. I'm not gonna be sitting there taking notes with you guys. Yeah, by the way, what are we spamming in the chat today? Let's do Sons of Thunder. No. Pillage the Village is too gruesome. What do you guys think? Morning Village. Hey Boris, how's it going, dude? Oh, you'll be on the way to the beach. Nice. Sons of Thunder. Sons of Thunder Assemble. Let's do that. Let's do Sons of Thunder Assemble. Let's see if it works. Sons of Thunder, Sons of Thunder. It's not necessary, guys, for spamming the same thing. Just, you know, just talk to each other, react to what I say, and it's gonna be all fine. But we're starting. All right, let's go. Let me pull some of my stuff into the thing. All right, welcome everybody to lecture number 17. Woohoo! We are in the middle of week 6. Last lecture we covered exterior design process. We didn't go too much in depth into, you know, compositional aspect of it, but prior to that we had basics of environments 101. So we covered a bunch of basics there. So if you guys need to refresh some of your memory, or someone is, you know, listening this pre-recorded or after the stream is done, you know, go check out those lectures. It is crucial that you have the full picture in mind, and this week in particular is dedicated solely to environments, what to think, what the basics are, and how can we use it in our visual development portfolio. But today's topic is a pretty complicated one for me, at least. Exterior designs are pretty tricky, and I think that interior designs are pretty tricky because for me, with exteriors, it's pretty simple. You have atmospheric perspective, things receding into the horizon line. You have your focal point somewhere in the middle ground or in the foreground, and there's a forest in the background, there's clouds, and everything is fine and dandy and simple, I guess. Unless it's a giant village. There's a lot of designing in that. But when it comes to interior designs, right? I'm going to repeat a little bit myself from the previous lecture, but we always have to think what's the intention is. Here in front of me, I have pretty good solid, I would say, explorations or blueprints or concepts. I think the one for Hearthstone, it was done for Hearthstone Animatic. The one that you see right before you enter the game, and they were done by Vasily Zorin. And as you can see here, this is very, I would say it's very polished for my taste. It explores the layout, right, the main shape of the room, but it's done in kind of like top-down, 3/4 view. What for? I'll explain a little bit later. But backtracking a little bit to our previous lecture, remember when I told you guys we need to remember what the intention of the environment is. And we have two intentions. The environment itself is the focal point, and then there could be some characters walking for scale, and I gave you some examples from Klaus, actually, I think. Let me see if I have them here. So you just have a little bit of a better reminder of what it looked like. I have a lot of files here. Yeah, so something like this. The environment itself is the focal point, or something like here or here. The castle is the focal point. And then it's a little bit empty, so over here, you know, Jasper appears and everything is fine. But when it comes to interior designs, right, I think with interiors we have the same concept. We can either have our environment itself be the focal point, and then of course it can be more complicated or less complicated. Like let's look at example here in Klaus. See, there's still a lot of acting space for our protagonist to go around, and there's nothing too interesting in the environment that would distract us from the acting. Same thing here. This one is done by Vasily Shushko. I'll write his name so you guys see him. He did a very good animation short called X-Story. I'm a big fan of his work. Vasily Shushko. And this was done for an Battle Auto Chess Battler cinematic. But you can see here, the interior design itself is also very stage-like. You can imagine a character walking through here, acting, maybe jumping over things, and nothing is too interesting to captivate our eye for a really long time. The environment itself is designed to support the story. The environment itself is designed to support the action, reactions, animation, so on, so on, and so on. All right, and then same thing with exterior environments, right? Sometimes, so here the environment itself is the focal point, there's plus a little bit of a story, right? But same over here, right? We just have a mountain for scale, then we have people riding on cars. This is from Love, Death, and Robots. Vasily Shushko also, I think, directed it, where there's a bunch of robots for hire trying to infiltrate train or bus on wheels or train on wheels. Doesn't really matter. So yeah, how do we think about their environment design before we start? Again, we need to think of the purpose. And usually when I work, there's two things. First, I need to explore the environment with characters in it, and characters are kind of secondary, and then the environment itself is the focal point. So I'll do something like this just to explore the mood, just to explore the world, and acting part of it is not that important. And then there's second one, which is you're designing the environment to support the story. So for example, here I started a new painting for you guys, but I'm not gonna dive too much into the process of it because I want to leave it out for kind of like a keyframe, for the keyframe week, when we're gonna be diving into keyframes and story and color and light, because for the most part, the center is the Vikings and the props inside of it, and the room itself, the design, it's secondary. It's there to support, again, to support the acting and the interaction of everything else. But we will go into this more in depth, and I did this from a black and white sketch. And next week I'll be covering black and white process to color, which should be really fun for you guys. But to backtrack back, again, oh man, the garage door. Ooh. Can you guys hear that? I'm so sorry. Yeah, my neighbors are opening the garage door. It's like a spaceship. I am sitting in an environment, and there's a huge alien ship just getting ready for launch. So yeah, the garage door opened, and probably pretty soon it's gonna be closing down. But not to lose my train of thought, right? Again, what the intention is. Is it the environment itself? Is it the characters? But even if the environment itself is not the focal point, you still need to think who lives in there, how does it operate. Like for example, I really like this one because it has a little workstation here, it has a tool shed and a toolbox thingamajig here. It has letters that they process for the kids, and then over here they have, you know, the goal, or I guess the schedule board with the letters already processed through this. So when this environment was created, as you can see over here, there's a lot of drop off here. So I think the artist just elongated the canvas. But as you can see here, later on, this thing was populated with a lot of characters later on. And the intention behind this environment was, well, there's going to be a scene with a lot of characters in it. So if my environment is already noisy, if you're going to add even more noise, which are the characters, then the simple statement or the scene that the environment is created for is going to be lost. So what the environment artist did here, he tried to make, you know, the bottom floor and everything else as not noisy as possible, to maintain, you know, the detail balance in the scene. For example, in this scenes, as we can see here, because it was designed for 2D animation, And I think the camera was panning from here to here, if I'm not mistaken, like this. This is A, camera B. I might be mistaken, but as you can see here, it's the same concept. When we're designing exterior or interior designs for any, for any animation or visual medium that is going to use it as a background, we'll always have to think about that usually our characters are our main actors, and the environment should support the story and not distract from the story. Of course, there will be sometimes environment-driven scene when a character goes and looks at something really, really important, like a statue or a bunch of weapons or a throne, and then it's okay to make parts of environments as the focal point very interesting and very detailed. But again, keep it simple. Do not distract the viewer's eye from what they need to look at. And of course, if you're purely an environment artist, go crazy, because when we designing, for example, for games, we have very important locations sometimes. And I want this camp to be for everybody, even though it's mostly for visual development artists for animation. But I really want you guys to have a perspective on the whole industry, right? So for example, when we are designing for games or we're designing a level, right? And this was done for Outlaws by this guy. Sorry guys, can't pronounce his name. Shanat Bavanya. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. But it was done for Outlaws. As you can see here, it's purely level design / environment design. And usually in games that have, first person or third person kind of experience, the world itself is the focal point and you're running around and it has to be interesting. It's not about cinematic framing, it's not about animation and filmmaking, it's about world immersion. So for example, when we're creating interior environments for games, it's okay to go overboard. It's okay to design every little aspect of it, because we always have to think about the viewer and the viewer's experience. And again, what's the purpose? In the games, the purpose is you run around, you can pick up items, you want to be immersed into the world. You want to see little details here and there. And if you stop to look at something, would it be, I don't know, Skyrim or Sea of Thieves game, for example, everything should look nice, because the cinematographer or the camera is the player itself. And let's say in our game, we're going to have, we're going to have a bunch of boring spots with nothing whatsoever going on. The player will think that this world is empty. And in animation, it's a little bit different, because everything is calculated, everything is measured, and there's no way an audience will get bored because, well, there's like a person fighting another person in a bar, and then this is just a background thing. And we cannot physically go and look to the right or to the left. We can only look where the cinematographer tells us where to look, right? So that's the main difference between designing for animation-driven backgrounds and game design or game-driven environment designs. And of course, sometimes even in games, you have you have like cinematic looking sequences, and then games sometimes hire cinematographers, hire people who do stuff for animation to make sure that a certain level or a certain location where things have a conversation and feels like they're in a movie. And to play devil's advocate, different games have different approaches. 3D games that has an open world, the camera is not locked, so you can technically move it anywhere you want. In certain games, that are side scrollers or anything else, there's more control over perception of the player. So sometimes they would do the same thing as an animation. They would design the frame to show a certain cinematic look and a certain action. And then it's like, you know, when you enter a boss, it's like, to describe it better, it's almost when you are entering a boss fight on a level and you feel something is missing. An actor is missing or someone is missing. Same feeling here. You have the environment and you feel like something is missing. The actors, the action is missing. Same thing in games. Sometimes you walk into a level and then you're like, oh boy, and then you wait for the boss music to cue in, and then the level starts. Right? So there's a lot of similarities, but again, in animation, you're trying to keep things as simple as possible. Not to distract from the story, not to distract from the emotional thing. And you know, if the story needs more complications and it needs, you know, more detail, then you put in an environment. It's really hard to think about, you know, interior design specifically without a context. So for example, if we would look maybe at more designs here, and this is just, I think this is a good example of interior designs that in the concept stage, which is very populated, and the environment itself is the focal point. But if we will look at the scene itself that it was used at, this my language today, it's early morning, sip of coffee, 1 second. Here you go. We need to look at the scene in context, where the environment was used. And I think this particular environment, I think Klaus was going downstairs here. And as you can see here, the environment itself is so noisy, there's no real focal point in there. And the only breathing space over here is where the actor is coming from here to here, and then I think it cuts. I might be mistaken, they might not use this variation of the shot, but I'm pretty sure they use this shot 100%, which is an environment-driven shot. Yeah, this is an environment-driven shot, and I'm pretty sure there was no character acting in it whatsoever. As I look at it, there's no space to put Jesper or Klaus into it. So I think it was just a transitioning shot when Jesper, if no one saw Klaus, it's a mailman who came into the workshop and then started exploring. And I think maybe there was like a shadow in here. Maybe he briefly walked over here, right? But for the most part, the main statement was, it's a spooky, forgotten place. And then if they had the same shot, they showed it prepared. Same concept over here of the workshop, but if we compare it to the final shots in actual, in an actual show, this was the concept art frame or a keyframe with mood and colors in it. But if we look at this scene, I'm pretty sure it's pretty similar in terms of color palette. You know, same hot spots from the top, and then same browns and greens in the shop. But as you can see, the scene became, first of all, wider to host more people, and then it became a little bit less noisy in here. But let's look at other examples here. So we have the hunters, I think it's the hunters or the Bat Kids house in the Klaus animation, feature animation. And here it's a little bit more noisy in my opinion. And for some reason I don't have the final shot. But the final shot, let me see if I could find it. Hunters house Klaus, so you can see the comparison, the Klaus animation. So you can see the final comparison of what was in the concept art stage and then what came out of it in an actual animation. And I cannot find it. So if someone wants to find it and just DM it on me into Discord, that'll be great. Yeah, and then let's look at this. This is Jesper's little tent where he's being brat. Same thing, right? This one is a little bit more interesting because, well, the environment is there again to support the character and characters acting. But let's dive into similarities between environment designed for exterior and interior, because there are certain things that go across both worlds, right? So first of all, if we look at exterior designs, would it be mine or other people, right? First thing that we see is there's depth. There's foreground, middle ground, foreground, right? Let's look at Jesper. What do we see here? We have foreground, and I talked with a few artists who worked for Klaus, and then the feedback was always put something in the foreground, let it be super contrasty, always have things super close to camera, just so there's this illusion of things going into perspective and things having in the foreground for depth. So a good environment, would it be exterior or interior, always has good foreground elements and also has middle ground, and this one doesn't really have a foreground, right? But always has depth. And if we look into other interior designs here, we have something in the foreground here, we have foreground, and then we have the middle ground. We always can walk in this environment and see that we can go far away. Our eye can travel. Right? Same thing here. What do we see? Super dark object in the foreground for depth. And we have another beam looking thing in the foreground here for framing also, right? And then we have middle ground, and then we have foreground. As we can see here also, remember when I talked about paths, that there's always ways to walk through the painting, which is called flow. Exterior or interior design, it always has same principles as in the exterior design. Let's look at this concept, or this concept. We have framing, with those two beams, and this one's a little bit too dark to see, but we have framing, we have foreground, we have middle ground, and then we have foreground. We have flow, we have leading lines that get us through the environment itself, right? And we have and then we have a clear focal point that everything supports, right? The focal point here is this guy is the son of the hunter, right? And then he probably sits in this chair, and after a few iterations this was changed to have more hats on the walls and more deer carcasses on the walls too, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, let's look at this environment. That is a variation of this, but let's look at this one better because it's a little bit brighter. This one is a little bit, you know what, let's just do this just for the sake of presentation, because even for me it's hard to look at. It's too bright, it's too dark. So same thing here, right? We have a pretty bright environment, but we also have foreground, middle ground, foreground, and a little bit of atmospheric perspective. Guys, when I am designing any interior shots, and this one is a pretty good example of it, I love volumetric lights. You can use volumetric lights in, what's the word in English? Instead of atmospheric perspective, because what atmospheric perspective does, it layers a lot of air and particles in between things, so they appear lighter in the background and become the color of the atmosphere. But cinematographers do it all the time, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it when we're going to get to cinematography and color and light in week 7 or 8, I believe. What they do is they basically flood the entire shot or the entire environment with a little, it's called a fogger, with smoke artificially, right? And here maybe it occurs naturally because there's there's dust and sawdust, and maybe there's some, maybe some fog. It's early morning, the sun just raised. But you can use volumetrics in big environments like this, because it will happen, because there is atmosphere. And if people smoke in the I'm not sure if Klaus smokes, but if there's people smoking in the environment, that also can be something nice. And if you want to convince them, you can also use vents that produce hot air. You can use technically anything to justify atmosphere in your interior shots too. Because if we can see here, over here we see a lot of atmosphere going in, and sometimes we as environment artists, we use it as a cheat. It might not be actually scientifically accurate, or it's not really it doesn't really make sense, but sometimes you need this fog and atmosphere just to push things back into the background. I use this gradient to pop the foreground elements. That's what happened with me here. This painting started to become so noisy and a little bit all over the place, that I used the atmosphere and lighting to bring my focal points and my foreground, middle ground, foreground elements to have a little bit of separation between them, right? So same thing happening here. So this is a little bit of mentality or similarities between exterior and interior design. So first is depth, right? A second, clear focal point and clear purpose for the environment. If it's outside or inside, it's always story driven, or it is itself the focal point, right? So now let's talk a little bit about planning aspects of things. Because remember last time I showed you the planning blueprints basically for my exterior design demo, and it looked something like, let me show you guys. It looked something like this. Where the hell are you? Here you are, right? So same thing applies to designing your interior designs. So for example, I really like this example that I saved and lost. Yep, here. Whoa, I didn't copy the line layer. So same thing is happening here. So when you're designing, an environment, there's more possibilities to where to put your camera, and sometimes it could be a little bit limiting. Why? Because there's walls. So for example, if there's a wall here, you cannot put your camera over here, right, and show the entire thing in 3/4, right, if you want to be super accurate. But I can tell you this, a lot of the times when you see an animation shot or an actual film shot, they would cheat a lot of the times. And how would they cheat? Well, in actual, filming practice, when people are filming any kind of room, they will have a fake room without a wall in it. So the camera can freely move from point A to point B, which is 180-degree rule that we covered in the storyboard lecture, right? Because this way the room sometimes can be too small to show everything that you want to. So what they do is, of course, the edges of the room are not showing on camera, but they're actually physically outside of the room just to have more coverage, so they can have a better framing of the room. And you can do the same thing. So don't be constrained by, well, it will be technically impossible. Of course, you can have a fish eye lens for your camera and have very wonky lines that gonna have a fisheye effect on your entire environment. But again, we are cinematographers, we are illusion makers, and if you need to remove a wall to put it, you know, somewhere outside, why not? Because in all of these environments here, we have no idea what's going behind us, and we assume that it's part of the environment, but it could be, you know, it could be a film set, and there's people standing with microphones, and there's a Sergio Pablos with a camera who says, "Cut," you know. So treat your environment designs, exterior or interior, as a movie set always, and don't try to chase realism, because again, we're here to create an illusion. And again, for people who do exterior environments professionally, for people who are trying to go into environment designs professionally, I would really recommend you doing something like this, which is doing a kind of top-down 3/4 view of your environment, and then placing a camera in it, and then doing one polished environment piece with really good framing and staging. So this way, when anyone looks at your portfolio, they can be like, well, he can think about the entire layout department or the 3D modeling team in this regard, but also he has a really good eye for what parts of his environment he's going to present. Because when we go on photo shoots or, you know, film shoots, I'll say it's an imaginary film shoot, because when you're designing your concept, you have to design your concept, let's say for animation, you have to think about, well, where's the camera movement is going to be? How can we use the environment to our advantage? And where is the good spots for the camera and the actor to act out in? Because sometimes you will get a task, let's say in the visual development stage in the beginning, which is going to be, well, the action will take place, let's say on a submarine, right? And the main character is going to be trained another character in a game of cards. And you're going to be thinking, all right, so I need to design a submarine, which is my environment, right? And but the main action is taking place on some kind of a table where they're playing cards, right? So what you can do is, let's just turn this into a submarine. Let's just imagine this is a submarine, right? You're going to do a 3/4 view, and then the rest you don't really care about that much, so you can just kind of wing it. And then over here, you'll be designing what? You'll be designing the table. You'll be thinking about where the character's acting can be. He's going to be looking at the window. He's going to be standing by another table. Is there a place that he can smoke? I'm not sure if you can smoke in a submarine. Probably not, you know. And you'll be thinking about all of those things in the blueprint stage before you commit to the, you know, to the actual shot, which is going to be something like this. Again, there's a lot of planning involved. And let's say you planned out your 3/4 view, and for people who are part of the visual development camp here, for people who are doing keyframe art and they are story driven, you have an option to do a 3/4 view if you want to plan out it roughly, but you don't have to. I am going to be mainly looking at your shot in terms of what you framed into it. I don't care what's outside the frame. So for example, if you have your main characters, you know, living in this area in an interior design, I'm okay if you just have the camera pointing out here and you're not explaining everything else that is going beyond the shot. Because again, we are training our storytelling skills and our cinematography skills. But for people who want to be better at storytelling and they want to do more environments, I really recommend doing the shot of your character in the frame in your exterior interior variations, and then at the same time including this, because if a client sees this is going to be a big plus in their book, because they can understand you are a cinematographer and a storyteller, but you're also a designer and a practical person that understands what's going on beyond the shot, and it's really important. So yeah, let's just dive in a little bit more into the process of creating the exterior designs. So first, just like in the last lecture, everything comes from emotion. So, and by emotion, I'm like, Is it cozy? Is it scary? Is it boring? Is it this or that? Something that you feel when you enter a room. You all probably went and visited some friends. Each house or each interior environment has its own smell, vibe, and it's every time I go to a new house, it's like a little roller coaster because there's so much sensory overload into my brain that shows me who lives there. So when you're just starting out, try to put yourself in the shoes of your character. Is it a Dracula who lives in a very cold and unfriendly environment? Is it an ogre that lives in a very stinky environment? Is it a super organized scientist that does fine art, like in Arcane, for example? And then let that emotion and brainstorming influence your next stage, which is, again, reference gathering. So, for example, here, I think for this workshop, when I was doing this interior shot, again, I did the same thing. I did a bunch of boats. I did a bunch of, again, stuff for Klaus. I like Klaus a lot, so there's a lot of Klaus references there. There's a lot of real-life blacksmithing things, real construction, real draw cars, right? But again, I started with emotion, what I want to convince, and then I went into the mood board. And then after the mood board, I did a very sucky thumbnail that I threw away. And this is kind of like my planning. This just didn't work. And then on try 2, I did the black and white thing. And then I started painting from there on. So same thing with you guys. Idea, mood board that is all tied up to a feeling, and then you start exploring. And I would really recommend doing again, the layouts in a very rough shape like this, because this is very low commitment, and this can show you the best possible angle that is possible out there. Even if you're not going to present this in your portfolio, at least do a rough sketch like this while you're thinking out loud. And as you can see here, the concept artist did the same layout thing that I taught you guys in previous lectures. He first thought about the top-down view and the overall shape of the building, and then he transferred it into an actual layout or an actual box, and then he populated it inside. When it comes to 3/4 views, top 3/4 view from top down like this, there's no depth, there's no cinematic framing. You are purely thinking about what to populate your scene with, just like in the layout here. You're just thinking about the cluster of objects, of props. And for example, if in the exterior environments we have forests and mountains and bridges and castles, you just downsize all this into interior designs, and instead of things going into perspective, which is going to be trees and everything else, you can have, I don't know, props like pencils scattered on the floor. You can have, shelves like this going into the distance, showing the vanishing point. If you put your camera over here, right? Of course, you can have characters themselves standing. If it's a big environment like this, like honestly, if you're tackling big environment like this, it's basically like, for me, I treat it almost like an exterior shot, because there's going to be so much atmosphere in there. The objects are so massive, and there's going to be so much atmospheric perspective in it. Like if you remember the design of Moria from Lord of the Rings, right? Those pillars are like statues, and we're inside of a giant mountain. So it's kind of funny. If you look at the movie Hobbit, and you are inside the mountain, how do you treat it? Are you doing an interior design of a mountain? But the thing is, it's such a big mountain that when you're inside of it, it feels like you are concepting a big exterior shot, because there's going to be, you know, mountains within a mountain, and then there's atmospheric perspective in there, and it's kind of an interesting blurred line, right? So I think when I'm thinking about interior designs in general, I'm thinking about something small and local, like a room or a great hall, and then whatever is bigger than that, I usually say it's an environment, and it's kind of it's gonna merge both worlds together. So yeah, you have an idea and emotion. You put your camera somewhere in your interior environment. You can remove a wall if you need to. You can also make a 3D model if you want to. Another thing is, for any environment design people out there, or for people who are just starting out in concept art or visual development in general, learn 3D. Open Blender like today and create a cube. I'm gonna tell you this from the bat: I do not know 3D, and this really shoots me in the leg a lot of the times. And 3D will make your life much easier, and you're going to be deeply appreciated in the industry or in the pipeline if you can do a really fast 3D mockup and then just, you know, populate it with a bunch of cubes and simple shapes. And then what you can do is you can paint over everything. Yeah, so do learn Blender. It's really good. It's free. There's a bunch of tutorials online. Do not be me. Do not be old school. You know, make your life more simpler, and just go learn those cubes. Yeah. So you're in the blueprint stage: idea, mood board, emotion, and let's say you did think about all of the details, which is, first, every time when we're doing almost anything, honestly, you always have to think about how it's constructed. Is it going to collapse? Is it not going to collapse? Is it functional? Is it not functional? Where's the doors going to be positioned? Basically, if you would inhabit this cube as the character, try to think about where you put your books, where would you lay down to sleep, where would you work. Or for example, I don't really like this position of the table. I would like to, you know, look at the door from maybe like over here, maybe. I don't know. Right, or maybe it's okay. Maybe it's a window going to the. Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, it's helipad. So if it's a window, then he is directly looking at the door. If anyone is going through here, for example. So again, every time you're doing anything with your environment, think about that. Real people have to live there. How do they get to this level, or how do they get to the table? How do they sit? Where do they eat? Because if you're not gonna have, you know, the real world aspect of it, even though it's a fictional world, in mind, your environment is gonna look fake. Yeah, so do that, and then you choose your camera angle, and then you start thumbnailing. As I thumbnailed with the exterior design, you're doing the same thing, and you are thinking. So for example, let's look at this really bad thumbnail and I'll explain why it's bad. Because in this thumbnail, I had a line work layer, and then I just filled in everything with black and white. But why I'm showing you a bad example of a thumbnail? Because first of all, what does this thumbnail show? It shows nothing. It shows there's beams, wooden beams. There's like a guy in the foreground doing something. There's a boat that they're working on, which is fine. And there's like statues, and there's the gate. And what are we focusing on? We're focusing on this. Kinda, yeah, but, you know, I would rather, you know, 100% focus on this and this being the foreground. And we're trying to focus on this at the same time, so it's just not working. So for example, in this design, we're focusing on the environment is the supporting character, and then we are focusing on the building, and then it's behind, not distracting, right? It's still there for style points and coolness points, because, you know, Viking statues are cool, and I still need to design a little bit more. right? But again, it's not as distracting anymore from what's going on in here. And man, I really want to finish this shot. I really like this guy. This guy is gonna be like Edna Mod of the Viking War. He's gonna be like, yeah, I'm walking here, you know, just commanding the whole thing. His nickname is probably gonna be like, I don't know, Duncan Long Legs, because he has no legs and he floats on a little anti-gravity device. Yeah, and honestly, there's no other, you know, there's no secrets to interior designs. They're very similar with exterior designs again. The only nuances that I would point out that there's more emphasis on, let me delete all of this. There's more emphasis on detail and props, because you need to populate your scene with something inside of it. So be very conscious of, I call it, you know, computers have RAM, and everyone says like 8, 16, 32, 40, blah, blah, blah. So there's such a thing as detail or noise capacity in your environment. So it's amount of detail you can shove in before your environment basically becomes super fat of detail, and if everything is detailed, nothing is detailed. So be very conscious where you put your details. And you know what, just for the funsies, let's just do a little environment together, because I feel like actual hands-on experience for you guys will be better. So first, I'm just going to create a box. You know, should we create an environment design in terms of the box, or should we frame it already? You know what? I am a cinematographer already, so let's just do it in framing already. So let's have a frame. I had really liked doing, you know, 16:9 type of a deal shots. And then when you're thinking about your environment, you know, always start loose. I usually start with just perspective lines, you know, kind of like this. not very detailed, right? And I have no idea what I'm gonna paint now. So right now, what I need to do is to, you know, feel something and see what I want to do. So what do we want to do, guys? Do we want to do like a Viking bar? We can do a Viking bar, or we can just do, let's just do a, you know, a boring room of a warrior type of a deal. All right, so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so a warrior needs to sleep somewhere, right? So let's think about, if I was a warrior, I probably would have had, you know, maybe there's gonna be a bunch of hay bales, you know, and hay bales are gonna be just on a bunch of junk, you know, and then those, not hay bales, but this hay is going to be all over my environment. So you see, a lot of the times when I'm creating an environment, it's all you need to do is to create walls and then a floor. And then if you have walls in the floor, then you can think, all right, what do I put on a shelf? What do I put on the floor? What do I put on the ceiling? So if anyone is struggling with starting an environment design for interior or exterior, honestly, you either come up with a table, and on the table you come up with, well, I'll put a mountain here, I'll put a statue here, I'll put a lake here, and again, you're just populating the scene, which is your exterior environment. But with interior environment, right, all you have to do is like, okay, I have a floor, what do I put on it? And then you go on from there. All right, so it's gonna be, you know, this guy, maybe it's gonna be a cave, you know, why not create a cave? I like the idea of creating a cave. So there's gonna be some, you know, kind of like a nest, and then inside of it, there's gonna be, you know, a cute fireplace. You know, super boring right now, nothing too creative in it. All right, so there's a fireplace and some stones. If he's kind of Ooga Booga style of a character, almost primal like, what else is he gonna have in the scene? So if it's a cave, let's just, you know, start creating some cave looking rocks, Maybe, you know what, if there's going to be a rock near him right here, maybe next to him he can put, you know, maybe a little candle. Maybe they have candles in this universe, right? And I can put a candle here. And of course I need to remember about depth. So you know what, let's just put a rock in the foreground like this. So I'll have a rock in the foreground here. I'll have a, you know, maybe another rock here just for framing, right? Are we gonna have, you know, a door that he goes through? Is it gonna be a bear hide? Is it called a bear hide or a bear skin hanging on? Or is it gonna be barricaded with some improvised door made out of wood? Let's make the fireplace a little bit smaller and put it somewhere here. All right, so let's make, so the shape of the door is going to be something like this. Maybe it's going to be very small. So what I'm going to do is, you know, maybe he's just going to have an improvised door made out of, you know, fiddlesticks that are going to be very roughly tied in and intertwined. It's almost like he's in jail, actually. And maybe it's going to have hay in between the door too, for keeping him warmer. You know, and the door is going to be kind of fluffy. You know, in ancient Vikings used to like use moss and then, you know, basically do like a little pattern and then put everything together with sticks intertwining. Okay, so what else? You know, let's just put him here, just, you know, sitting for scale so people understand how big the guy is. Oh, you know what? Maybe let's just make him super big, kind of like this. It's gonna be like, and a little bit puffy. You know, he's just gonna be sitting on his nest, and then maybe he's very hairy. You know, he could be very hairy, and he's just, you know, he's just chilling. Maybe you know, maybe frying like a rat. Or something, right? So, and again, see, this is my brain speaking. It's really hard for me to design an environment as a character itself. I always design character and environment that he lives in at the same time. Like, for example, a lot of people will see that, hey man, like those characters changed a lot. Why? Because when I was creating this environment and I was getting in the mood with my characters, I'm evolving the environment with my characters because I'm basically starting to know my main protagonist and the world that they live in. And that's why I cannot plan everything ahead 100% in my interior or exterior designs. Why? Because I'm leaving some room for exploration and what's it called? Discovery, right? Because you have to really keep this thing interesting. And when I'm creating any frame whatsoever, I always try to surprise myself. So the world starts living on its own, and basically all I have to do is just see it and then paint it down. And again, each step of the way is usually influences your decision later on. For example, in here, I was like, well, they're doing something, and then there's this super cool deer lamp thing, but something feels wrong. So what I did, I'm like, okay, what if they harvest giant potatoes that give them energy? You know, that science experiments that we did? And I know it looks like a rock, but I call it the potato. They call it the potato, you know? And then the world is like, oh, now there has to be some green in there because now they're going to have energy in there. And I didn't have that in the beginning. So every time when you're painting anything, or let's say you're designing a little cave for a caveman, always leave some room for discovery. You'd basically download all of the necessary components into your head, which here was, well, it's a cave. Maybe there's maybe over here he can have his own little hangar for his primal close. Maybe not. Maybe over here he just, you know, he has more rats drying off. And see, again, it's easier for me because I have a little bit of a shape of the cave. And now all I have to do is try to populate it with different things, and it's easy. As long, because, you know, treat your environment design as you just moved into a new house. You know, you just moved into a new house, you have an absolutely clean room, and then you have God mod on installed, and you can just, with a flick of a finger or however fast you paint or draw, you can populate the scene with anything you want. And another thing that really kind of wants to be here is probably like a bear hide on the floor, you know, and then also it's going to create a little bit of depth in here. Are we going to have more of the background of the cave? You know what, we can make a pillar here, and then in the background we can have, you know, maybe more space that he can walk in. Or maybe it's going to be a very secluded place. I want it to be a very secluded, something like this. And maybe we have, you know, drawings of his tribe people, you know, killing animals or something like that. There's going to be like a bunch of prints of arms and maybe even feet, something like that. Yeah, and then all I have to do now is, you know, get some tone into it, and I'll just do it like this, and I'll just light the fire, and now he's just sitting in there. And I created a keyframe again, because story for me is keyframes. I just cannot create an environment without a character, without a story inside. And maybe on the other side we can see a little bit of, you know, moon shining through the door, but for the most part everything is going to be just affected by the fire. So see, I know it's not the best environment ever out there, but it's an interior, and I just showed you really briefly what's going on through my brain. So again, first, just create the box. Either like this, if you're just creating a keyframe, or you can plan it like this. Then start thinking out loud. See where the door goes, how the door looks. See where would he put his items, where would he sleep, where would he put the fire in there. And keep one thing in mind. Make sure that the environment has depth in it, foreground, midground, foreground, right? And then everything is receding in the perspective. Another thing that I want to point out in all those Klaus pictures. And another thing is, guys, I'm not showing some of the Klaus work on purpose, because Toby is gonna, actually he did a lot of backgrounds, he did a lot of layouts there, and I want to, you know, I want to leave the juicy parts for the Saturday. But as you can see in all of the environments, if it's exterior or interior, look at the perspective. There's always receding lines that show depth, and there's, again, same idea of flow and same idea of controlled detail. We already covered it in exterior design or interior environment design 101, which is control your detail positioning in your frame, because if you oversaturate something, it's going to become very, very important. So for example, here there's three basically focal points, or for the most part two, that have the most amount of detail. The rest are just leading up to them. So we have a station with you know, with tools. It has a little bit less detail than the station with papers. Just see how many letters are out there here, right? Because I remember in this shot, Klaus was standing here in the shot, and it's okay that this place is the most contrasting one in most detail, because in this environment, that's where the Klaus walks on stage, right? Then we have some people working here. It's all in shadow, not very important. And then we had a person swinging, I think, from a ceiling here. And then we had some people working there. And then the rest. It's a rest area for the eye. They're just leading up to the focal point or to the main stage where the action takes place. In terms of pipeline of how to paint an exterior environment, it's absolutely the same. You have a layout, you block it in with local colors, you have your sketch layer on top of everything, you block everything in, you get your main lighting going, and that's it. So for people who want to see my process, go rewatch previous lecture, which is exterior design process. It's called that, and just see my explanation. And it's absolutely the same for interior designs. One thing also that I want you always to keep in mind when you're thinking about your interior designs, and if it's, you know, and if it's, it doesn't matter if it's a house, if it's, you know, if it's a great hall, props are really important part of environments, because again, without props or day-to-day things, as you can see here, Vasily Zorin, he thought a great deal about how the chair looks that they sit on, you know, how big the barrels are, what the cutting stage, what the cutting station for for wood looks like, how the pottery looks like. Because again, you're like a professional IKEA advisor, but for clients. So when you're doing an interior design, always think about, well, what items would stay in this house and what items would leave this house, right? Because if we look even on, you know, here, for example, right, it's a tavern. What stayed in there? Of course, there's a lot of Easter eggs from Hearthstone in general, but over here we have Hearthstone board, we have meat, we have some poison, or it looks like probably just booze, right? And we have a bunch of candles. That's 100% would stay in this kind of era of where the environment takes place into, right? And then we're thinking about maybe there's going to be an announcement board, right? When they say, hey, at this stage, we're going to all go in this room and then we're going to battle each other, right? And is there going to be plants? Why not? I'm not sure what this plant is called, but it definitely is possible that this plant will make into it. So yeah, always put yourself in the position of the character, put yourself in the position of the environment itself, and again, you're the IKEA guy of this universe. See what stays and what belongs and what doesn't stay. And then with that in mind, populate your scene with your props, with your little items, trinkets. It's really fun to leave little Easter eggs or tools that your character may use. Right? For example, in this scene, I am still thinking about actual design of the tools and actual functionality of how things put on the boat, and the actual functionality of the interior design itself, right? Because, you know, the ships land from the roof, and right now I have no way to get to the roof. Is there going to be a staircase? And there's going to be another opening over here, for example, right? With a staircase leading down, and some Vikings are going up it. I do not know. This is a puzzle that I need to solve. And for you, there's one thing that I want you to understand. Raising questions is really good, and then answering them one by one. So first question, where does the action or the interaction or the environment takes place? It's a Viking world, day, sunny, blah, blah, blah. Okay, answered one question. How does it function? What is function? Another question. You think, well, they build boats in there. Well, how do they build boats? And that's another question. Does it influence the design of the interior itself? Is there going to be hooks lowering something down? Is there going to be a bunch of chains to hook things up to it? That's also going to influence your design. So always ask a bunch of questions and then find an exciting answer. And then if you don't get excited about the answer, well, maybe do it anyway, because if it's just a practical solution, but then maybe try to find, you know, something exciting. So for example, for me, where do they get all of the energy in it? And this is a little bit into the world building, but I wanted to show you how important it is to think about those things, because see, again, design and, you know, actual painting, that's not the hard part. The hard part is thinking about all of those things, answering those questions for yourselves, and then, you know, painting it. Because I want you to start thinking a certain way, because when you will start thinking a certain way, that's going to reflect in your design choices, in everything else. And in the practical application, it is super, super easy. You draw a box, you populate the box with different things in it. Then if you want to do a keyframe, you either put a camera in there and then you paint it, right? Or you leave it as it is and then just presents the concept with doing some call outs to the design, and then maybe spinning some things around for better presentation. That's it. All right. The hardest part about this is just sitting down and imagining it all in your brain. And how to do it, I basically already told you. I think we're gonna do questions and answers right now, because I'm slowly running out of things to say, because it is so similar to what we talked about before, right? And I just want you two guys to be able to, you know, ask me directly here, and we're gonna keep it here for now on YouTube, and then we're gonna jump into Q&A session in Discord. So if you guys yeah, so any questions, guys? I am gonna be monitoring the chat right now. Right now I have one. How do you keep things properly scaled, like stairs with doors, proportions? Well, trial and error. You know, you do the box, and then you need to have some kind of a point of reference. So if you have a door, and the door is this big, and the human is like this big, you know, then try to see how big the staircase is going to be. So if it's going to be like a staircase like this, you know, some staircases are bigger, some are smaller, and you know, it always comes into comparison. So you need to see things next to each other, and it's just impossible to do things in the void, right? So if you're talking about perspective in general, well, if you want to keep things proportional, then you need to dive into 1-point perspective and be like, okay, well, this doorway is going to be something like this. So I can see that this door takes like what? This part of the door, right? And I just do a horizon line like this, and the door can be something like this now, right? Go study 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective. And see how things scale down or up, because we just don't have the time to go over the super basics today, because it's a little bit more in an advanced class. And then see how the vanishing points interact, and then do the same thing for your object. So if this is a doorway, you know, and you can imagine it as a cube, and then you can have a vanishing point. And if you want to have the same doorway but in front of you, right, it might be this big if the perspective is correct, and this wall is super far away, right? So if you want to keep the proportional scale right to the T, you know, either model everything in 3D, it's really helpful, or simplify things into simple forms like cubes and squares. Or sometimes I just eyeball it, you know, does it look right? Yeah, it looks right. And then trust your eye. It depends on what kind of artist you are. I know that the advice trust UI for people who are just starting out is not really good, but you need to practice it. Does it look correct? Does it look right? Compare yourself to other people and see how it goes. All right. Yeah, how do you keep things properly? So an environment designer can be doing both. That makes sense. Well, props. There's sometimes a separate prop designer guy in the industry or in the pipeline, but I feel that prop design should be part of environment designers repertoire, and he can use it as a tool. Because if you can design a room, and then in the room you have to create a statue, is the statue a prop or part of the environment, right? And if an environment designer can do a statue, you can do a little statue, or a piece of, or a chair, or a little trinket. It should be logical that the environment designers can do that. So yeah, it's kind of one goes from another thing, and I strongly recommend you guys thinking about what you populate your scene with prop design wise. Like, for example, our tables props, or are they part of the environment? They're part of the environment and they're a prop, right? Same thing with barrels. Let's say, for example, here there's a little target practice with knives in it. It's a prop. There's food laying around. Prop design is part of the environment, because if you're not going to have props in it, it's going to be a dead environment. Yeah, and also environment artists should be able to paint a little bit of people to populate these scenes too. Is it necessary? No, but sometimes it does help with selling an idea. Yeah. Let's see more. How do you keep blah 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 blah? All right, let's see. Trying to find the questions. If you guys can, maybe duplicate them into the chat, if anyone has had any, that'd be great. You may sketch furniture with an environment, and the props artist might be doing job in defining the furniture design. Yeah, really good point, Natasha. Your role as environment designer is basically pave the way and then explain as much as possible. Like, for example, why I like Vasily Zorin's concept is he's an excellent environment designer, he's an excellent prop designer. So technically he is delivering the whole package as a visual development artist. And 3D modelers, then what they can do is they can either take this thing out and then, ask for a turnaround. I'm not sure if you need a turnaround for this. This is pretty self-explanatory. The other side is absolutely the same as the other one. And they can already model it. Like, for example, a lot of the times I work in a team with my friend Felipe. So what I do is I do a color key, and then what he will do a final illustration out of it, defining it more, polishing it out, and rendering. Same thing can happen with an environment. There's different environment stage, and there could be a rough one where you just explore everything again super loosely, and then you can go and pass it on to a guy who's gonna put it all into perspective and define it more and finish it up. Sometimes you will just do all those stages yourself. It depends on the pipeline that people use and on the director, because let's say Borja, he knows that I hate polishing stuff, and he knows that I'm really fast and good at just coming up with ideas and making everything rough. And he knows that Felipe, for example, may have this is not true, but this is just for an example. Felipe might have a harder time, or another artist might have a harder time coming up with ideas, but he's really good at illustrating and then finishing them up. So he will just join us as conjoined twins, and it will just work in symbiosis, I guess. Yeah. Sorry I missed, but can you explain again volumetric lighting and how that is different from atmospheric perspective? Okay, so there's question number one. Any general thoughts, advice on interior environment page composition. Okay. Okay. So on, sorry if I missed, but can you explain the volumetric lighting thing? So volumetric lighting, I'm gonna go briefly over it, just because you asked. But since it's part of the interior design that I mentioned, I'm gonna go over it really briefly, because we're gonna go in depth a little bit more on the color and light lecture, and I just don't want to, overwhelm you with too much information, guys. But volumetric lighting, what it is. So every time when you have a light bulb in your environment, and also another thing, guys, as you can see in interior or exterior, where the lighting always comes from, either left or right, same thing as we mentioned in the previous lecture. But when we have a light coming from, so if there was no atmosphere here whatsoever, those beams would have been much more contrasty and more, more in front of us, I guess. They wouldn't be so pushed back into the background. So what artists do when we are designing our environment, we sometimes add some volumetric light. What it means, volumetric light, when you can see the light. If I would make it even more dramatic, I would do something like this, right? When you have the God rays. The thing is, you cannot see photons. The only reason why you can see photons if you have particles in the air. So when we're talking about the difference between how we can do both things in an exterior environment, let me see where my environment is. Let's say, for example, here, and we have, well, this is a little bit of a bad example, like here, right? This hill is probably as green as this thing, right? But then as it goes into the background, it becomes the color of the atmosphere. Why? Because there's layers upon layers. So if we see that this is the castle, or this is the mountains, like this, and this is our eye here, we're going to have layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of particles in between. And as information goes from from the object into our eye, the local color of it, some of the information of this local color gets lost in the layers of atmosphere in between us and the object. And the only thing that is gonna be left there is either a super strong color, which is gonna be like red or something else, or the color of the environment. Let's say it's the sky is blue, then this whole thing is gonna be tinted blue. Why? Well, because that's the strongest color in the environment. It's the blue atmosphere that shines on everything. So the atmosphere is just gonna swallow all of the local colors of this object, and it's gonna be tinted blue. And again, see, the same thing is gonna happen with atmospheric perspective, or volumetric light in interior. So see this layers upon layers of atmosphere or fog or dust. Over here we have Jesper, and as you can see over here we also have a lot of volumetric light coming in, and those are just dust particles. Yeah, because they probably wanted to show that there was like, well, there's a what's this called? It's not a bong, but there's some aroma things, and it populates the scene. And this way, the light is traveling through those little particles and illuminating them. And when you illuminate them, they basically create a little, a little curtain or a little smoke. Like if you imagine this as a plane, a little smoke plane that makes the value of the object that behind it a little bit lighter. So when we're talking about this thing, it's the same concept. So this beam over here was this color, right? But as it's receding into the atmosphere, it's becoming lighter and lighter. Why? Not because it changes the local color, but because there's more particles that are lit up by the light in between. So imagine that we have, this is a plane and this is another plane standing behind us. So technically, if we would have just drawn the same, brown color over and over again, and just would have had, a white, thing in between it, as a plane like this, what happens to it? It basically took the same color as this color ball, right? So yeah, every time you think about volumetric light, or you're thinking about atmospheric perspective, right? Because it's the same thing. Imagine that your ball of local color, or your object, this could be anything, this could be, this could be a cube, this could be a castle, is basically blocked off by a layer of particles that are lit up by the sun. And what they do, they basically create a filter in between you and your local color, until this local color either absolutely, disappears, or if it goes further into the atmosphere, you would say it would become a little bit more blue, something like this. If there was an atmosphere here with the blue sky, but here the only thing that is happening just becomes more lighter and more lighter and more lighter. So yeah, technically, volumetric light and atmospheric perspective, they operate on the same principles, right? And just for the demonstration's sake, let's make another one over there. And then just, farther away it goes, so now see, farther away it goes, now there's not one plane, there's two planes in between us and this object. And that's why it's become lighter and lighter. And you can technically just create as many imaginary planes receding into the, into the atmosphere or into perspective as you want. And of course, the density of the plane of particles is sometimes 20%. It could be a clear day, so it's be 10%. Sometimes it's going to be very foggy. It's going to be like 99%, but it really helps to imagine this in this regard. So hopefully this helps you out. I'm not going to go too in depth in terms of why and where the color changes, because I want to cover it in color and light next week. But I think hopefully the concept is understandable. Yeah. Okay, what do you, did I explain this better? Opium pipe. What is better, to design first for a building, exterior or interior? To design first for a building. All right, so if you're thinking about, again, your story. So for example, if I'm not gonna ever see a building outside, and then the interior shot is very important to my story, I will start with interior and then I will come up with exterior, because I am starting with my focal point or my main simple statement, and then I'm building everything around it, right? I want to build my stage first where the action takes place, and then I want to justify it, how it actually functions, right? If you are just designing from scratch and you just need a location, I would start with outside first, and then I would do an incision, or kind of like a cut, almost kind of cut let's say if it was a tower, cut the tower like a cake in half, and then design the inside and then place the camera. So again, you have to start from the most important thing. So if the story is important on the inside of the house, start with that, build your environment around the story, and then justify it with the exterior design. If you're purely designing an environment, and it's a house, for example, you need to do an interior. I would start with outside first, because you need to first have a box that you populate with things with, and then you can again go and then open that box out and populate the scene and place the camera, and then have an interior shot. Hopefully that answers your question. Any general thoughts, advice, or interior environment paint composition? Not really. Besides that, treat treat your page like it's a composition. So whatever is dominant, have it bigger. Whatever needs extra explanation, just have a a little pointer. Again, this is pretty good explanation of things. Just organize everything nicely. Make sure that the important things are bigger and more contrasty, and then things that are secondary and they're less contrasty and less dominant in the page. And that's it. It's all about trial and error. There's 100 ways to present things, but I like how Vasily Zorin did this a lot, and David Keg. I really like how he did. So he did what he did. I think he did the bar, and I think he did kind of like the entrance to the bar, and then little things. Again, see little call outs here and there. You just populated the scene with call out. If you want to do and you want to be a 3D artist an environment artist in a 3D pipeline, go and have some call outs to actual textures and photo textures, so the 3D team can actually see what the materials are there. If, for example, if you didn't have enough time to paint them. But for example, Vasily Zorin, what he did, he basically, he painted all the materials. There's no questions asked. This is wood 100%. If he wanted, he can do gonna call out this is wood, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And I think 3D artists and texture artists will have no problem looking at this and already translating into an actual functional design in 3D. Yeah, I would think the exterior first before the interior, the way it's kind of like a frame for you to put stuff in. Again, yes, it could possibly be that, but for the most part, it depends what your story is and what's the starting point. Like if I knew that I wanted to do like a Viking punching another Viking in a hallway of a Viking castle, I'm not going to design the whole castle just for one hallway. Right? I don't need to design a whole castle for this one hallway. And again, it depends. Context is really important. But in a traditional sense, what I would say is, if you have a room or a house, design the house first and then put things in there, because it is kind of like a frame or a thing to populate things. All right. Yeah, they're also called God rays. Trying to find any more questions. All right, any more questions, guys? I'm gonna count till 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if there's any more YouTube questions, I'm here to answer them. Yeah, but if not, again, too fast. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm waiting, but while I'm waiting, I'm just gonna recap. So idea first, motion. Then you do a box. You populate the box like an IKEA guy, and then you think about props. You try to live in that place. You have to put yourself in those shoes. You have depth. You have foreground, midground, foreground, if it's a frame, and yeah, and then just like in the previous lecture, you block in local colors, you have your composition and perspective all in check, and then you just pay extra attention to detailed distribution in your environment, because that's what kills an environment, I think, in my opinion, because a lot of people just make it too complicated. All right, so there's no questions here on YouTube, so maybe people are gonna do it live on a Q&A session in Discord itself. So for people who are listening this and recording, we do Q&A sessions right after the lecture, so don't miss the live lectures if you want to do one-on-one kind of voice thing. Yeah, don't miss those. And if you have any more questions, guys, you can also, leave a comment and maybe, have your question there. Or again, we are doing this for a while now. Maybe your answers will be in the previous lectures. There's a lecture on basics of environments and exterior environments before that, so do check those out too. Okay, for people who are Ma Vikings and who are in the Discord, your homework is the same. Exterior, interior shot of your main protagonist outside, inside of their natural habitat. You know, for people who are more environment driven, you don't have to do a keyframe out of it. That is story driven, what he does in his home. What you can do is you can just do this, as I'm showing here an example. You just can do this. You can do more in-depth interior like this, and then exterior. Maybe like here on the right, you're gonna have the same house, but you're gonna show, you know, the roofs, and then you're gonna open it up to the next. If you want to challenge yourself, do this and that, and also do a keyframe with a camera in there. For people who are just visual development artists, who are learning the environment design just to improve their keyframes, just to do the keyframe with your character inside and outside of their natural habitat. But yeah, that's it for today. Join the Discord Q&A session. I'm excited to see you, my Vikings, in there. For people who missed it, too bad, you're missing out. Yeah, please do not miss Friday's feedback session, because this week feedback session will be this Friday. And do not miss the Saturday stream with Toby Trebelha, because he's going to be going over layouts, how he did things for Klaus, and he's going to be talking about basically everything that we covered here, but more in depth, because he actually does much more layouts and environment designs, and he's probably going to show us some kind of a demo or a speed paint. So it's going to be super awesome and exciting. So yeah, that's it for today. Stay hydrated. You're the best Vikings in the world. Bye-bye. See you Friday and then a Saturday. Bye-bye.